Thank you for being with me today in our preview of a recent podcast episode, a podcast called English Language Test Prep Radio, which is dedicated to helping you to improve both your English and exam skills, whether you're taking the TOEFL, TOEIC, or IELTS test, so that you are able to achieve the highest score possible. Today, we have a preview of a recent episode, a vocabulary episode. The podcast is bi-weekly, and every 2 weeks, and which is going to be this week, and two new episodes are produced. One episode is about an English language or exam test tip, and the second podcast, which appears on which appears on Thursday, is about vocabulary. And so this is a recent podcast episode, episode 18, which talked about the vocabulary word patently and 3 money phrasal verbs. So let's go ahead and get started with our preview of this episode. If you are studying for the IELTS test or the IELTS or TOEFL or TOEIC exam, then you probably need to improve your vocabulary. And one of the best ways, of course, is by reading, but the second best way is to study vocabulary directly. And that is conveniently in my vocabulary email blog at bit.ly/vocab email. There's 15 vocabulary lessons, and every 2 or 3 days you receive a new email with a resource or a vocabulary lesson that's going to help you to improve your word power so that you do better on the exam. If you're studying for one of these 3 tests, the IELTS, TOEFL, or the TOEIC exam, one of the best things that you can do right now is to improve your vocabulary. So that is bit.ly/vocab email. As I mentioned earlier, today we're looking at a preview of episode 18 of the English Language Test Prep Radio podcast, where I gave you a lesson on patently and 6 money phrasal verbs. Today, we're going to look at patently and 3 of those phrasal verbs to help you out on the exam. So, we always start off on the podcast with the vocabulary episode with a new vocabulary term to help you. Now, on these exams, the IELTS, TOEFL, or TOEIC exam, you want, of course, to sound more sophisticated, to use a higher level of English on the test. And one of those ways is to, of course, study vocabulary terms. So, patently. Patently is an adverb that means clearly or obviously. For example, Judge, her testimony is patently false. I object. Patently, clearly, or obviously. Okay, let's start with our phrasal verbs. Now, I know phrasal verbs are sometimes challenging for students. My own students, I go over phrasal verbs, collocations, idioms with them to make sure they're on their toes, they're paying attention, and also they're sharpening their vocabulary for that high score that they're looking for on the test. So let's start off with our first phrasal verb, our money phrasal verb, to shop around. To go from store to store, comparing prices so that you find the cheaper price on the good that you're looking for. For example, Mrs. Harmon is a smart consumer. She shops around before she buys her goods. To shop around. Number 2, pay something off. Now, if you are using your credit card, this is something certainly you would, a phrasal verb that really applies, right? To pay something off, to finish paying money that is owed for something. For example, Leo is still paying off his credit card for that trip to Bali. And our final money phrasal verb we're looking at, rip off. That's not a good one. To cheat someone by charging them too much money. Rip off. Taylor got ripped off when he paid $1 million for that junky car. To rip off. So to rip off, of course, also has other definitions as well, and that's what makes the phrasal verbs so tricky. But in this narrow sense of money phrasal verbs, to rip off means charging someone more money than something is actually worth. So now you have 3 phrasal verbs, money phrasal verbs that can help you on the IELTS, TOEFL, or TOEIC exam. So continue to build your vocabulary during your test preparation. I'm not only a blog author or a podcast producer, an English instructor, a certified English instructor, and prepare for the IELTS and TOEFL and TOEIC exam. I'm also an author. I really care deeply about helping my students learn English, and not only my own students, but all candidates and students around the world as well. So what I've done is I've written 181 best collocations, idioms, and phrasal verbs to help you to study for the exam, all in one volume. You can purchase the ebook at bit.ly/181CIP. 181 best English collocations, idioms, and phrasal verbs. Not only do you get a definition for each term, but also a sample sentence so that you can use the term correctly, and also periodically quizzes. Of course, we love our quizzes, right, as teachers, to test your knowledge. And of course, you can use all 3 of these types of terms on your IELTS or TOEFL or TOEIC speaking test. And of course, you can use the collocations on your writing exams. Now, to get all 6 of the money phrasal verbs that I covered in the podcast episode, also to download the transcript and take the quiz, because there's always a quiz included in the podcast episode, just visit my website at bit.ly/ELTPR018. And you can listen to the podcast, take the quiz, download the transcript, and of course, improve your English vocabulary for that high score that you're looking for on the test. Well, finally, good luck improving your vocabulary. Good luck studying for the exams, whether it's a TOEFL, TOEIC, or IELTS exam. And stay tuned for more live broadcasts that are going to highlight not only the podcast episodes, but also tips that are going to help you to improve your score on the TOEFL, TOEIC, or IELTS exam. To get a head start, head over to my blog at EnglishLanguageTestPrep.com. I'm Professor Wynn. Thank you for being with me today, and I'll see you in the next video.